Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another interview episode. I'm Alicia Galambus, and I'm the director here at EAG Innovation. Today, we have a special guest, Andreas, who's here to talk to us all about cultivating your workplace. Now, we know workplace stress is really tough right now, especially as we're still in a pandemic state. So we're so happy to have Andreas here to give us some tips and some tangible takeaways. Andreas, I'll let you introduce yourself to everyone and tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Thank you. Happy to be here. And so my name is Andreas, and I'm from Sweden, a country to the far north with polar bears in the streets. And Sweden has pretty much a reputation of being quite a leading force when it comes to having great workplaces. And I got into this 4 or 5 years ago as a profession. I've had my fair share of bad workplaces, and I reached a point where I was like, this can't be what people have to expect of work. Like, I want people to go to work on a Monday and feel good. We want people to be able to sleep Sunday night knowing that the workplace they go to is good, right? So I got into that, and I've been on the receiving end of a lot of bad leadership, toxic leadership, bad culture. You have fancy words on the walls, but there's another practice going on, stuff like that. So well, that's a little about me.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned those fancy words on the walls because we can put up all the motivational posters we want, and it's not going to mean anything unless its actions are being taken. I know you briefly mentioned toxic workplaces, and I'm wondering if you could expand a little bit more about some of the signs or ways we know our workplace is toxic.
Well, one good thing is that you have to, like we talked about fancy words on the walls, but there's not really being practiced, right? That's the first really big signal, because usually when you onboard at a new role, you get told, this is what we are, this is what we do, and etc. Right? But especially when it comes to international companies, you do have a tendency that locally there will be sort of like I call them subcultures, that something that lives in that tiny group of people that isn't always representative of what the company actually wants to do, right? And usually that boils down to other important factors that's playing, like it's a lot of family involved, like nepotism. Your boss is related to this guy, and with the positions they have, they can cover up anything they want to, right? But if you step up, you don't have that to fall back on. So if you screw up, you get exposed, right? So nepotism and subcultures, two big things. You could have, if we talk about management, like the upper management, the guys that aren't actually involved. Let's say you work in a warehouse or some sort of industry. There is usually a sort of distance between the upper management and the guys on the floor, right? And in those cases, subculture is going nuts on the floor, and the guys upstairs, they're like, everything works, we don't need to do anything, nobody really complains, stuff like that, right? So that's the three big ones, in my opinion, that you need to look out for when it comes to toxic work cultures in that aspect.
It sounds like there's three main pillars from everything from the nepotism to the subcultures. And I'm wondering how workers or people who are feeling like that speaks to my workplace, how can they begin to knock down some of those pillars?
Well, what you need to do first and foremost, if you are on the receiving end of unfair treatment, right? You just go to work, you do the best you can, but you get sabotaged, you have microaggressions, people ignore you, they don't invite you to meetings, even though per definition in your job title, you should be in that meeting, right? Main thing, do your best always, no matter the pressure, no matter the bad stuff coming your way, the words behind your back, focus, do the best you can, because they are looking for a reason to get you out. They're looking for a reason to get you fired. And if you just perform, you do your job to the best of your ability, of course, you raise a flag if you're asked to do something that is not in your role description. You raise a flag, sorry, that's not in my description, and then you talk about it, right? But the most important thing is to always push to do the best you can, because then you don't give them the satisfaction of distracting your work, and they can't really get to you in that aspect, right? Which will make them maybe they will up their game, become more aggressive, but just keep going, right? Another good thing, document everything. Write down comments you get thrown at. If you have a meeting, everybody usually brings pen and paper. Write down if you get attacked for something, write down the time and date this was said, small notes. Because if it in a few years come to a point where there's like a head-on collision and you start throwing out documentation that says, this happened, they usually, the management guys don't do this kind of notes, right? They come to the meeting, I want to talk about this, the rest of the guys are going to listen, right? So if you sit there, take notes and basically record all the bad things being thrown at you, if it comes to a collision, then you have some sort of proof. It might be still word against word, but you have it documented, which gives you the upper edge in the when it comes to the angle of truth or not truth, right?
Yeah, I think that's very important. It's a task that we sometimes miss because we're so caught up in our situation, whether it's the toxic workplace or whether it's a leader taking or giving out abuse or those microaggressions that you're talking about. And I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit more about managing those microaggressions and when is the point that we want to fight and take action against leadership.
Now, every situation is individual. For my sake, I'm pretty stubborn, so I can keep my head down. For good and for bad, I was bullied when I was a kid, and that has given me, in one aspect, a determination that you're not going to break me, right? And also, as long as you have the support of your family, because the thing is, I know you guys talk a lot about mental health and things like that. And the thing is, if I have a bad day at work, if I have to spend 8 hours like this, being on my toes, that's going to take a lot of energy, right? So, and that bad energy usually comes with your home. So you need to, make it clear at home that, okay, this is going on at my workplace. If I have a bad day, please, if it's a really bad day, let me be. If it's, me just being whiny, put me in my place and say, shape up, right? Because it wasn't that bad of a day, right? And these microaggressions, basically, and this is easier said than done, but ignore them. If they keep you out of information, just request the information publicly if you have a meeting, right? Because then they can sort of reject it, right? In one workplace, I was not given a role description for 1.5 years, even though I asked for it, which meant that I was used here, there, and everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And this was like what do you call it? This was like intentionally on their part, right? Because then I didn't have a document to support me, and like, oh, no, that's not my job, Mm-hmm. So to counter the microaggressions in a respectful and professional way. Like if they attack you for not knowing enough, then you just politely said, look, I was not informed about this. Could we please look at the process of information so that we can avoid this for another time? Play the high game. I think when Michelle Obama was the one that said, when they go low, we go high, right? Do that, because you're not going to win by paying them back with the same methods, right? So you just have to try to stay collected and just push for, doing your best, document everything. And when the microaggressions, happen, as long as, it's micro, it's like small things that, peck, ignore, right? What you need to do is you need to save your energy for the big things. Like when you have a huge situation, again, let's go with the warehouse example, that you have like some sort of accident, no, nobody got hurt, but there's some sort of incident that has an impact on the workflow, right? That will be discussed afterwards. Your main focus is just dig in, do the best in the moment, clear it, and then afterwards, if there's any discussion and you're the one that's getting blamed and it's a big thing, that's when you put your feet down and say, look, I asked for support, I was not given support, ergo this happened, so and it's not about deflecting responsibility. You're taking responsibility for your job. You did your part, but you were not given the support you're supposed to give, right? I've been in many situations like that I'm told, we're understaffed today again, and but you ask for the guys and they will come when you need, right? There's been so many times that the microaggressive approach was that no, keep the guys away from him, let him struggle, and the worst thing you can do to them at that point is to succeed. Because I was in a workplace for 4.5 years, and the only reason they bought me out was because they couldn't find anything wrong with the work I did. It was just boiled down to that the guys that was managing me did not like the way I was doing things, if more efficient in a different way, more of a like, let's do this together approach instead of you do this approach, right? So at the point when these guys cut me loose, I was actually walking out of there with my head high, because I had done everything I could. I had documented everything. I could prove that I was not the error in this, right? And it is a very stressful situation to be in this, of course, right? And then you have to do this sort of, you can't trust anyone in the beginning, because you don't know really who's allied with who. But in a toxic work environment, it is very rarely one person suffering, right? There's a lot of people that have different degrees of suffering depending on how far away they are from the manager in charge, right? And in my case, I was pretty far off. There was no relation, there was no connection in many parts. Like, we were put together to work together, right? And so what you do in the beginning is you take your time, you take the good with the bad, you learn who's who has connections to who, right? And then you get into really this sort of like subculture aspect of it, right? Like, because in a team of 20, they could still be divided into 4 or 5 groups depending on nationality, interests, gender. It could be all kinds of mixes, even in a small group, right? And then you get to a point where, like, okay, now we need to fight back somehow. And then you actually do the opposite, and then you start like slowly forging alliances, talking to people that you see are experiencing the same treatment that you are, right? And you band together in that aspect, right? And because you might not do anything here and now, but the day it goes like this, that's the day these guys will support your version of what happened. And you usually don't even have to tell them to do it or ask for it, because when HR and upper management start investigating what went wrong here, right, they will ask people. And some of these guys, let's say you have forged sort of an alliance with 6 guys or six co-workers, right? And something goes bad, and you realize that, okay, I'm on the way out, but at least when on the way out, I'm gonna let the world know what happened, right? Usually I would expect maybe 2 out of these 6 people will step forward and tell their side of what happened. And that side, of course, since they have the same experience as you, they will support what you said. So you could have you still have a word against word situation for the most time, but still you have someone supporting you. And upper management will know that even though they get rid of this guy, there's still going to be 2 other guys that feel the same way, right? So you might lose that battle and be out, but trust me, it's a blessing. They will still have the trouble with, okay, we still have some guys that feel the same. What do we do about that one, right? And so that is just forge alliances, and then when stuff goes bad, push it up the chain, make everybody in upper management know what happens, because then they can never say we didn't know, right? Send emails, write things down, talk to them over, take a wrong turn and go into, the top manager's office and, oh, so how are you? Yeah, change some words around, right? And that is what I've come to see as for me at least, the best way to handle being a toxic work environment. Of course, the best thing is to get out if you can, right? But it's not always that it's possible, especially now when we have these times. In Europe we say Corona. I know the world says COVID, but in this Corona/COVID times, it's not that easy to decide when or where you want to go when it comes to work, right?
Definitely.
So to be able to push through it, you just have to stick to it, do your best, document, forge alliances, and then let people know up the chain. And
right.
Of course, get out when you can, right?
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks right now, it's really hard to make a decision in regards to getting out because they want to, or, I've heard stories of positionings opening on the other side of the province or across the country. And some of those provinces are currently in a bubble, so individuals can't travel to that new work location and are finding decreased opportunities from having to stay in their area. And there's also that worry right now, specifically in regards to fear of being fired for standing up, especially as employers are beginning to take more advantage. They think, because folks are home more, they can ask for something at 8 p.m. at night when you're supposed to be putting your child to bed. Or they call you at 5 in the morning asking if you can be at a 7 a.m. morning meeting. And all these things are coming up. So folks do want to leave, but are worried that if they begin to stand up and advocate for their rights, they'll be fired. And I'm wondering what individuals can do if they're feeling like I stood up for myself and now I feel like I may be fired in a few weeks or close down the line.
Yeah. First thing, be proud, because not everybody stands up for themselves. We are, when we come together in like a team, usually we fall into the what's best for the team aspect, right? And if I get a little shit, as long as we finish up our stuff, everything goes, right? But the thing is, if you reach a point where you feel I have to stand up, then you just go in with your gut feeling, right? And it might feel bad in the sense of, oh, I might lose my job, but you will feel better as a person. You will feel better inside, because the thing is, being in a stressful work environment or a toxic work environment and feeling the pressure building up, right? That stress has to be handled. Now, everybody's stressed right now. Managers are stressed, coworkers are stressed, and everybody in the supply chain, for example, are stressed because these are challenging times, right? And what you need to do at that point, like if you reach a point where you feel you need to stand up, take pride in it. Also, try to include other people in this, in the standing up moment, so to speak, right? Do it publicly, do it, in some sort of town hall meeting or something like that. Unfortunately, try to avoid doing it in like a one-to-one meeting with your boss, because then only he knows you stood up. And if he wants to get rid of you, he's the only one who knows why he got rid of you. But if you do it in some sort of town hall meeting, you are sort of like a little bit protected, because no manager really wants to be known as the guy that fires people for saying, speaking their piece, right? Also, if you speak out publicly and your closest manager doesn't like it, make sure the guys above him know that you're looking out for the company's interest. Because I got a really good advice at one of my jobs when I was like really feeling down, and my union rep told me that, look, these guys, they don't own this company. They are just as much of a employee to this company as you are. They might have a different role, they might have a different title, but they are just the same type of employee that you are, right? And that is really a healthy way to look at it. No matter how high up the food chain any type of manager you're dealing with it is, It doesn't matter because he's still just, for the most time, an employee like you are. And when it comes down to work law and stuff like that, labor law, you have the same advantage. And even though, let's say you do get fired for speaking up, usually there are ways to somehow go in and fight this back. You can do it in court, you can do it off court, and bring your union representation. That is very, like in Europe and in the Nordics, we have a strong union.
Here too.
So it's very shifty in other places of the world, for example, right? But in the Nordics, we have a pretty strong union, and these guys, they know how to push the right buttons to protect you and to give you some sort of recognition for what actually happened, right? And the most important thing is, like, when you stand up and you get nervous, speak out, talk to people. Is there a union? Talk to the union guys, talk to your friends, bring in family and friends, because could be that this brings some friend of yours that, by the way, I know this guy, he needs people. And then all of a sudden you're on the way out before they do something, right? But no work, no job is ever worth sacrificing yourself, your own mental health, or anything like that. Because usually any company you work for can replace you within a week, unless it's your own company, probably. But most companies, they will replace you like that, right? And HR, they always have potentials. One guy goes out, one guy comes in, right? So never feel bad for wanting to have a good workplace. Never feel bad for saying this is not okay, because in most countries there are laws that regulate somehow how you should be treated at your workplace, right?
Yep. And that's a great thing too. Canada, we're very much similar to Sweden in that alignment that we do have strong unions. We do have strong labor laws. For anyone in Ontario watching in particular, where I know most of our listeners are from, the Ontario Labor Board and the Ontario Human Rights Tribunal, both fantastic resources for folks who are specifically in the Ontario area. And I'm just wondering, because these conversations have been so widespread, especially with media influences these days, I'm wondering if you could speak about that and how you've been feeling seeing all of this interest in the media to talking about these toxic workplaces and folks coming forward and individuals really sharing their stories right now.
Well, the thing is, it has definitely, what I've noticed is that pre and during Corona, before Corona, there was really sort of like on the down low, the whole work environment discussion. And now with Corona going on, it has basically in my mailbox exploded, because I have set up Google to send me emails about workplace related news, right? And I'm getting so much emails in that I can't process it all. And that's a bad thing from my admin. I need to shape up on my admin things, but it's really good that we're having the discussion, because the discussion has been so and so before. I can tell you a horrible example that Orange was like a French phone company. They had 10 years ago, I think it came a few months ago, the decision, but 10 years ago, when they were doing some sort of reorganization of the company, people killed themselves because they were getting pushed to the brink. And people like just opened the window of the office and just stepped out and like straight down, right? And it took 10 years, but finally they brought down the big guns, that the big guys upstairs who were like managing Orange all over. They actually got punished for playing their part in creating this toxic, hostile work environment that drove people to the brink of suicide and stuff, right? Because they needed to cut down. So what happened was that people were being mistreated. If they didn't want them to stay, they were being mistreated, so they would leave on their own, right? And then it backfired, and some people killed themselves while actively referring to, I'm being treated like this, I can't take it anymore, right? And what I've noticed now is that from let's say from crime to punishment when it comes to the upper management, that time has sort of like in many aspects shortened, because now you have sort of like, for good and mostly bad but sometimes good, you have like sort of the public tribunal, that we have this big discussion right now when it comes to the gaming companies that make video games, right? CD Projekt Red, one a really amazing company in many aspects, they promised last year there would be no crunch. Crunch, for those who aren't gamers, crunch is when the developers, the coders, the programmers work overtime, and we're not talking about 1 hour a day. We're talking like many hours a day. They work overtime for bursts of time, right? We're talking months, overtime for months. And usually it hasn't been paid overtime. This is what you're expected to do. You're expected to sacrifice time with family and stuff like that, right? So CD Projekt Red went out last year like, yeah, we're gonna, no crunch, we don't do that no more, etc., right? And now it turns out that a game that's coming out in a few months, all of a sudden they threw all that out the window, and now they have people crunching to make up for the time, right? And specifically in the gaming industry, there's been a really big discussion about toxic work environment, this sort of like superhuman expectations that you're supposed to produce for such a long amount of time without any compensation, without any rest, right? Also, now we have taken to the consideration that maybe before you could take 5 weeks of vacation and go somewhere, no one is going anywhere right now. Nope. You're in Europe, there's some places that they said, this place is greenlit, you can go. But most people don't go actually, right? And we had this whole Condé Nast, they own Wired, they own the magazine Bon Appetit, stuff like that, right? That started sippering out that, okay, these guys have been really mistreating people, specifically people of color, and also based on gender, that it was only, they only allowed what they would perceive as successful white contributors to do the videos, and then they brought in people with a diverse background as a exotic twist to some things, right? That thing exploded, and that sort of public tribunal, the outcry in social media, it worked quicker than any court would have done. So they were made aware that, okay, we need to change some stuff now, and some changes came. I think they hired a African American editor, like high up the chain, chief editor, and there's a lot of stuff going on. People are canceling subscriptions and things like that, right? And I think this is, in the environment we are today, people are made aware in a different way, and we can choose to support these companies. There's certain companies I don't want to do business with because there's something about how they do things that I can't really connect with, right? And that is how we can sort of have an impact on how we control this. Like the same goes with Wired, also Condé Nast. I love Wired, amazing articles. It's not so much fun to read it now when I know there's been a lot of sexism and stuff going on, right? So I actually had to do something about that, right? In Denmark right now, and for those who don't know, Denmark is a smaller country next to Sweden in the far north. They have their Me Too discussion now, 3 years after everyone else, because a very Danish and pregnant and very sympathetic woman came out and said, look, I had this situation happen to me, this happens everywhere. And all of a sudden it exploded in Denmark as well, right? Where people are talking about and sharing experiences about sexism and sexual harassment in the workplace, stuff like that. And the thing is, what is happening is that the small words we've been hearing here and there are all of a sudden it's turning into this wind, right? We all know that the gaming companies are a hard place to work with the crunch, but we sort of like closed our eyes because, damn, I really want that game. Now I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word, but we really want that game, or people really want to read that magazine. In the US, they have this Fort Briggs, I believe it was,
Mhm.
somewhere in the south, I believe it is, where I think it was around 20-ish, 25 Marines or whatever they are, soldiers, have,
Mhm.
had incidents in the last 6 months. One disappeared, one got, someone committed suicide, another one disappeared and was found in pieces, and a lot of sexual harassment, and these sort of like sexual initiations and stuff like that, right? And all of that is starting to come to light much quicker.
Yeah.
Also, corona related, we had this Navy vessel where I think 5-10% of the crew got corona, and the response from upper management was so slow. So the captain of the ship actually went out publicly and said, look, we have this situation, we're not getting any help, right?
Mhm.
And he was supported by his people. There's videos of him being cheered on by the sailors as he leaves the ship after getting fired for speaking up publicly, right? And of course, we have the situation with, for example, Navy SEALs are starting to look not as superhero-ish as there's a lot of
Mhm.
bad incidents going on there that is now like a big situation and discussion within military circles. Like, do we need to reshape how the Navy SEALs work and things like that, right? And the discussion in Japan is another interesting thing. Like, that actually is written into contracts that you as a female have to wear a skirt and high heels. End of story. That is a rebellion going on right now for the last 2 years, I think,
Mhm.
as well. It's sort of like same sort of like the Me Too approach. Hashtag no high heels, but in Japanese, right? And which has forced the Japanese companies to rewrite these contracts and actually be more liberal about what you are allowed to wear or not to wear, right?
Yeah. I think
So
all
the,
these
the
stories. Oh, go ahead.
ladies first.
I think all these stories that you're sharing, especially in regards to the media, I hope give individuals listening some inspiration and really some hope in regards to that it's possible to stand up for yourself, to get that media attention. If you want to go in that route of exposure, the public outcry will be there for you. Even if you just make a Facebook post about it, those things get shared. I've seen, especially within my community and the women in tech community as well, stories of coders sharing some of that, their experiences in like unpaid internship or cooperative education experiences where they're now working till 1, 2 in the morning and having to get very open and getting support behind them from other students within their faculty. And I think there's so much hope there, whether you get that big media attention or not, that people can take these actionable steps. And I'm wondering if individuals want to connect with you and have conversations or just see some of the things that you're posting in regards to workplaces. How can they connect with you?
Well, on that side,
Yeah.
they have my Twitter on this fine text here, and they also have my LinkedIn. That is my main channels right now that are English based. Twitter in Sweden is basically a dumpster fire of I don't know what. So Twitter, Swedish Twitter, I don't go near that. But when it comes to sort of like English or international Twitter, there's a lot of good information there. That's how I keep track of the whole Condé Nast thingy, for example, right? There was a lot of old co-workers that shared their stories and stuff like that. And it actually, I'm all about people enjoying their work. You don't have to love it. You don't have to love your boss, but you have to have a situation where you at least can work together. We are many billions of people in this world. We're not going to get along with everybody, but at least, we need to get along in a workplace environment, because whatever happens during those 8-9 hours, it spills over. It spills over on the time you spend with your family, friends. I've had a manager, something happened on a Tuesday, we talked about it Wednesday was everything was good, Thursday everything was good, Friday 5 minutes before I go home at midnight I get a paper saying, you look, we're going to blame you for this anyway. Weekend ruined. And by the way, we're also going to have a meeting on Monday. Weekend double ruined, So that we all deserve a healthy and respectful workplace. We don't all need a foosball table. We don't all need free soda, but at least we need to have a work environment where we can feel good and we can, develop ourselves, because development is needed, to help both with the mental aspect. You feel you need to go somewhere, you need to evolve, and that's basically what it boils down to feel good in here.
I love that. I think we talk about mental health all the time, and thank you so much for sharing that correlation between workplaces and mental health. I hope everyone's leaving this recording with a new sense of empowerment. Just a reminder for folks listening, we are here every Saturday and Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, sharing stories and tips that are meant to leave you with empowerment and helping you build a brighter future for yourselves and your family. Thank you so much, everyone.